Our special guest is one of the most influential social justice advocates and organizers in American history. You have touched the lives of millions of people and changed their lives. Of course, you are the co-founder of the I'm a little nervous. I gotta tell you, United Farm Workers, and also the founder and president of the Dolores Huerta Foundation. You've been arrested 22 times. I love that. And you are a two-time U.S. Presidential Award recipient, including the Medal of Freedom from President Obama in 2012, the highest civilian honor. You coined the phrase that is the heart of justice movements around the world, si se puede, and you created a grassroots movement to enroll and have Latinos and Latinas who were disenfranchised from the voting process to sign up to vote and turn out to vote. That was really the first time in American history that that happened, and all political parties now do that. So thank you for all of these gifts. I'd like to invite us back to fairly much the beginning. There's a name that was so important to you, Fred Ross Sr. Could you tell us what he taught you and why he is often called the godfather of farmers' rights?
And I also call him the godfather of the Chicano movement, okay? Because without Fred Ross, there probably would never have been a United Farm Workers. And I say that because actually Cesar and I belonged to another organization before we started the union, and that was a community service organization, and we had a chapter right here in Fresno, actually. And in that organization that was started by a group of Latinos in Los Angeles, and they were able to get the first Latino elected to the City Council of Los Angeles, Eduardo Roybal, who also became the first Mexican-American to the Congress of the United States of California. And the way that Fred taught us how to organize, well, no, first of all, he believed that people have the power to solve their own problems. They know what the solutions that they need, but the thing is that what they have to learn is that they have the power to do it. And the thing is that they cannot wait for somebody to come in from the outside, that they have the power, and the only thing that they have to learn is how to do the advocacy, you know, how to work the system, so to speak. And this is what Fred taught us. And so Cesar and I both learned from him and many other organizers. And the way that we organized people was in their homes. Something like a Tupperware party. I think ladies might know what that is like, or a jewelry party. And that you meet in people's homes and you talk about the issues, and then you show them examples of how other people have actually solved their problems. And once people understand that they have the power, and then they get involved, and then you grow the grassroots leadership that you need. And there is a book written about Fred Ross Sr. It's called The Social Arsonist, if people want to look that up. And he actually learned his organizing. I was happy that you had a song, a Woody Guthrie song, actually in Weed Patch, California, south of Bakersfield. It's a little town south of Bakersfield where they filmed The Grapes of Wrath. You know, Woody Guthrie and Henry Fonda were there. And all of the people that came from the Southwest, the Okies and the Arkies, and I'm sure people here might have some of that legacy in their families. And that's where Fred learned how to organize, working first with the Okies and the Arkies. Then he went to work with the Japanese when they put them into the internment camps. And then he was asked to go work, I guess, with the Mexican-American community in East LA. And so we owe our legacy to Fred Ross Sr.
One of the things you said about those early days of organizing, it required immense patience. I believe it was 3 years before you really took any action. I'm wondering if you have any advice. There are two groups here in Fresno that are in the process of getting started. One is ACE, the Association of Clovis Educators, who are looking to unionize Clovis teachers. And yes, we support
please.
that. The other is an organization called IAF, Industrial Area Foundation. They're just getting off at the starting gate here in Fresno. Some of our members of the church are part of IAF. And these folks are doers, and they're used to doing, and this is requiring patience. And I'm wondering if you could speak to how important it is to build relationships first before action.
Well, I don't think it's so much about building relationships. It's about telling people, letting them know that they have this power to do things. And I tell people my own story. I was an activist in Stockton, California, where I grew up. And when Mr. Ross taught us how to organize it, one day a gentleman came in and he had had a stroke. He was crippled and he was on crutches. And he needed some public assistance because he couldn't work, a farm worker. So I took him down to the welfare department down there so he could get some assistance for his family. And they refused to let him make an application. And so I went back to the office and I told Mr. Ross, I said, gee, they wouldn't let this man make an application. And he said to me, you go down there to that office right now. You go down there, take this gentleman with you, and you tell them that you want to talk to a supervisor, okay? Now, he didn't say, I'm going to write you a note. I'm going to call ahead of time to let them know you're coming. No, he said, you go down there. And I thought, I can do that? So I went down there and, summed up all my courage and said, I demand to see a supervisor. And the supervisor came out, and I said, they will not let this gentleman make an application, and he's obviously disabled. He can't work, he's got a family. And of course, they had to let him make the application. And then we found out that they had been doing this to all of the Mexican farm workers that were disabled and people of color. And so we solved that issue. But then I found out at that moment, every person who is a public official, was paid for by our tax dollars, that they have a responsibility to the constituents, to us. I don't care who they are, whether they're in the welfare office or they're in the city council or board of supervisors or in the Congress or in Sacramento. They owe us, their positions that they have, and we can make demands of them. And that is basically what it's all about. It's about, I call it Democracy 101. Democracy 101. When people understand that we, the people, have the power to make sure that these people that we elect do their job, but not only that, but we have the power and the responsibility to make sure that we get good people elected to office, okay? That's the important thing.
When you left Stockton and went to Delano, could you share just a little bit about what the working conditions were like in the fields?
Well, I was a teacher, by the way, before I left to become an organizer. And, farm workers were earning at that point in time about 70 cents an hour for their work. They had to work from sun up to sundown. Their conditions were miserable, terrible. There were no bathrooms in the field. And you can imagine for the women, especially what that was like. No drinking water, no rest periods, no right to organize, no unemployment insurance when between crop seasons or when they were laid off. They had no unemployment insurance to live on. In fact, it was so severe that they even had a law that they could not get money from the could not get food from the food bank unless they lived in one county for 12 months. So that was one of the first things we got rid of, back in CSO before we started the union, to make sure that if they lived in the state of California, that they could get a food from the food bank. They're not just in one county. So it was pretty awful.
From the outside of the movement, I talked to folks who assume it was greed that caused the growers to act this way, but I have heard you talk about it was something deeper and more insidious.
Well, I think when we think of workers, and I know we passed Labor Day not too long ago, I like to ask people, how many of us know how we got the 8-hour day? People in the audience? Yeah, there were labor unions, right? And what happened to the labor leaders that fought for the 8-hour day? They were executed. They were hung. And we don't even know their names, right? It happened in Chicago. They call it May Day now. When all of these people got together, they were fighting for the 8-hour day. And so all of the laws that we have, Social Security, we can think of so many, public education, all of the laws that we have right now that protect workers came from labor unions, labor leaders. And so what we see is that the whole idea of that anybody, any worker should have to spend their lives working to make other people wealthy and other people rich and not have enough for their own families. And that's the legacy of slavery. That's the legacy of slavery. And then, of course, when you add racism, which is also part of the legacy of slavery, right, against people of color. And so the farm workers, because most of them in current history were people of color. In fact, when they passed the National Labor Relations Act way back in 1935, they specifically left out farm workers. And one of the gentlemen from the Farm Bureau Federation at a press conference, when he was asked, why did they leave out the farm workers? And he said, because they were black and brown. So, you know, and as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said that, you know, racism is an illness that has to be cured. And slavery is also something that has to be cured. And then that extends also to women and it extends to children also. So this is the two things that we have to, and I just like to say to all of the audience, and I hope that you will repeat this with your own families, to remind people that we're one human race. We are Homo sapiens, and our human race began in Africa. So that means that we are all Africans of different shades and colors. And I like to tell audiences, take the hand of the person next to you. Take the hand of the person next to you. And turn to that person and say, hello, relatives. and the fact that we are one human race and as Homo sapiens, we survived on planet Earth because we protected each other. We took care of each other, you know. We shared what we had with each other. And that's how we survived, because we were the smallest of the mammals, and they could have had us for lunch, okay? But they didn't, because we protected each other. And then we can remember that, you know, that we have to take care of each other. And I love, like, just even the name of your congregation, the Unitarian Universalist Church, you know. And we could think about, when we talk about immigration issues, that on this planet that we call Earth, that we have money that crosses borders, banking. We have all kinds of goods and produce that cross borders, but yet people cannot cross borders. And if people cross borders, then we punish them. So, you know, I think it's like that John Lennon song, Imagine. You know, if we shared everything like we did at the very beginning, you know, everything that we have, then there would be no need for wars.
One of the things that I respect about you is, even as you were fiercely challenging the system to change, you were willing to make changes yourself. As a growing up in the Roman Catholic faith, initially before you went to New York for those 2 years with the Great Boycott, you were opposed to reproductive rights and abortion. And I wonder too, feminism and LGBT, how did the intersectionality of the work that you were doing cause you to change?
Well, I think when it comes to feminism, I thought I was a feminist. My mother is the one that raised us because my parents divorced, and she was always the dominant figure in our family. But again, being a Catholic, had been taught that abortion is a sin. And it took my reflection on that with Gloria Steinem and Eleanor Smil, the head of the Feminist Majority Foundation. And I'm going to add the word science, okay, to that also, that a fetus is not a child until it's born. And I had to reflect on that and realizing that women need to have the right to their own bodies. And I know that in the Latino community, and not just not Latino, but people of color community, there is a lot of campaigning against the issue of abortion for women. But I'd like to quote a great saying by the Mexican president, Benito Juarez. He was the first president of Mexico after the independence from Spain. And he had a great saying. I'll say it in Spanish first. In Spanish, it says, el respeto al derecho ajeno es la paz. In the English, respecting other people's rights is peace. Respecting other people's rights is peace. So, and I say that as the mother of 11 children. Yeah. my youngest son, Ricky, is here with me today, and he and his wife, Vanessa. By the way, they just celebrated their birthday, okay? Ricky yesterday and Vanessa today.
Oh, happy birthday.
And they don't have any children, okay? I respect their right if they choose not to have children, okay? And I think that's what we have to do. And the same thing applies to whom you marry. If it's someone of your own sex, I mean, it doesn't affect anybody else's life. This is your life. This is your human right to marry whom you choose. If that person happens to be somebody of their own sex, it's their business and nobody else's, okay? And we have to respect that.
And isn't it great to hear that in a church?
And I have to say this, and people ask me in the issue of gay rights, I cannot ever think in my whole lifetime that I ever thought that a person was gay or lesbian or transgender should be discriminated. I associated that discrimination with the discrimination against somebody because you're a woman or because you're a person of color. And I think I kind of trace it back to San Francisco when I was about 14, 15 years old. We used to go to San Francisco to a place called Pinocchio's Club, and they had people in drag, and they performed. And I was thinking, I think it goes back to that I thought that was so much fun, and I think we should all have a drag day. When everybody dresses up as a different sex, So I can't ever remember. One of my arrests that I have actually is with gay people in San Francisco. They were trying to bring in the medications that they needed to cure the HIV epidemic at that time. So.
In 1995, you gave an interview. They were creating an oral project to record the things about the farm workers movement. And I was struck by something you said in 1995. You said you identified the country was leaning towards fascism. I'm wondering if what's been happening these last, especially 8 years, has this surprised you?
Well, no, because I think people that are poor people, low-income people, people of color, we kind of we're like the canaries in the coal mine, so to speak, because you get hit with all of these negative policies that are happening. And I think one of the proof of that is when you look at our own valley here. Not only the way that the farm workers are treated, but you look at the prison system from Bakersfield to Sacramento. I mean, there were 22 prisons that were built since 1965. 22 prisons. And one university, the University of Merced. And we have more people in prison in the United States of America than India or China. India or China have billions of people in their population. We have millions, but we still have more people incarcerated than those other countries. And who are the people in prison? They're black, they're brown, and they're poor white people that cannot afford defense, okay? So this to me is fascism, the face of fascism. And fascism, the word fascism, I think comes from an Italian word, which means to punish and to hurt. And so we see so many of these policies that are being passed. I call them the haters. You call them something else. I call them the haters, okay? To punish women, like they're doing now on the issue of abortion, to punish transgender people or gay people. So many of these horrible, harmful policies are coming down. And then, of course, on education, to try to erase our history. And when it comes to immigration, I do like to say this, that when we think of all of North America and South America, the continents, these were the homes of native peoples. These are the homes of native peoples. And the true immigrants to the United States, to this continent, are people like one of my great-grandmothers who came from Spain, my other great-grandfather who came from England, okay? But the rest of my family was here to greet them when they got here.
So the Dolores Huerta Foundation is doing very important work in the Valley, especially empowering women, children, immigrants to become advocates for equity and justice. Could you tell us a little bit about what your foundation does?
Well, we try to empower people. We organize them at the grassroots level, and then they have to decide which projects that they're going to take on. So a lot of infrastructure projects. We have, as all of you know, here in the Valley, we have little towns where they don't have street lights, they don't have sidewalks, they don't have gutters, they don't have swimming pools, they don't have recreation for the youth, whatever. But then we take on the larger issues, and one of them, of course, is education. 40% in the state of California, 40% of the highest push-out rates, expulsions of children and lowest educational quality is here in the Central Valley of California. 40% in the whole state. And when we think of Los Angeles and San Francisco, the population. So these are the children of farm workers. These are the children of farm workers, and they're not getting the quality education that they deserve, okay? So that's one of the things. We had to sue the current high school district because they expelled in 1 year 2,500 students of color. In 1 year. After our lawsuit, that number went down from 2,500 expulsions to less than 21. But it took a lawsuit to make that happen. And right now we are active in 17 different school districts, covering about 250 schools here, trying to even get transportation. I mean, in Sanger, Parlier, the kids weren't even getting transportation to be able to go to school. So, and we have to think about that, about how is our education funded in the United States of America? When we think of at the federal level, which is the largest budget? The largest budget that we have is the Department of Defense.
Yep.
And the second is the Department of Agriculture. But that money is not trickling down. And if we do not do something about education, we will be producing more neo-Nazis. People that are racist, they're going to travel hundreds of miles to kill people because they're brown, because they're Mexicans, or because they're Jews, because they're Muslims, because they're Asians, or because they're black. We have to stop this. So education is very, very important for our country if we're going to stop the fascism that is creeping in and taking over. And of course, the only way that we can do that is to elect progressive people to our Congress, and to our legislatures and our school boards, okay? So it all comes back to Fred Ross's lessons about the people having the power, taking the power, and getting involved and doing the essential work, the electoral work that we need, to doing the democracy work that we need. Senator Robert Kennedy, before he was killed, minutes before, he said, "We have obligations and responsibilities to our fellow citizens." We have obligations and responsibilities to our fellow citizens. And by the way, there's a documentary. You can see a lot of what I'm talking about, that documentary. And Robert Kennedy, Senator Robert Kennedy, the documentary is called Dolores.
It's great. It's a magnificent film.
Yes, and you can get it on PBS, or also I think on Amazon.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Oh.
So I know that you gave us the gift of your presence because you're heading to the airport in just a few minutes to fly off to a national event, but you made the time to stop and be with us here at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Fresno. Thank you for the work you have done, but as importantly, thank you for the work you are doing and for the call to action you have given us all. Dolores Huerta.
Thank you. Well, thank you. So, now that you're all standing, two things. We have to remember that farm workers are essential workers, like firemen and policemen and health workers, okay? So we have to work for the day that they can get paid and have the benefits that policemen and firemen have, okay, and health workers, okay? Because they feed the firemen and the police workers and all of us too. And I'm gonna ask you a couple of questions if you don't mind.
Please.
Okay, and some of you know the routine, okay? So the first question I'm gonna ask you, and never forget this, I'm gonna ask you who's got the power. I want you to say, we've got the power. And then the second question is, what kind of power? I want you to shout, people power. And I want you to do it really loud so that the haters can hear us, okay? All right, let's go. Who's got the power?
We got the power!
What kind of power?
People power!
Are we going to use our people power to save our country from fascism? What do we say? ¿Se puede o no se puede?
Sí, se puede.
All right, sí se puede. Thank you so much. And by the way, there's an act on the legislature right now. It's called the Vision Act to get ICE, which is part of the immigration that are really mistreating immigrants a lot, to get them out of California. And so... So if you can just make a phone call to Governor Newsom and say, sign the Vision Act, okay? An email, a phone call to the governor's office saying, sign the Vision Act, please protect our immigrants. Thank you so much. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.